North Korea and Russia have signed a mutual defense pact. This is a major escalation in their relationship. And just what does it mean for the war in Ukraine, but also for the Korean Peninsula? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a really pretty unexpected story. Russia and North Korea have signed a partnership deal that appears to be the strongest since the Cold War. And this partnership includes a vow of mutual aid if either country is attacked. Now, I want to point out that mutual aid is not the same thing as a mutual defense pact, right? NATO is a mutual defense pact, and it requires all members to treat an attack on one as if it were an attack on all. So that means in almost basically every case that if a foreign nation's tanks roll into Warsaw, the United States, the UK, France, Spain, all NATO members would treat it as though foreign tanks had rolled into their capital city, meaning a general mobilization for war. So that is a mutual defense pact. Mutual aid is a little bit lower in the totem pole. This doesn't mean that Russian troops would be fighting South Korean troops. It would just commit to aid in the event of a war. So, for example, you would see perhaps Russian munitions, Russian artillery would be given to or sold to North Korea. So this sort of agreement is a little bit less concrete, but it's interesting because it actually encapsulates the existing cooperation between North Korea and Russia. You might recall North Korea, right? And likely the reason this treaty is signed and that this official state visit is happening is because North Korea, was willing to sell Russia munitions, particularly artillery shells, during a time when it had effectively expended all of its existing munition stores. And because North Korean weapon systems are essentially Soviet weapons, they're almost entirely mutually compatible. North Korea also sold a number of more sophisticated long-range weapon systems to the Russians, and North Korea, right, the Hermit Kingdom, is famously poor and subject to an absolutely eye-popping number of sanctions. As a result, of course, they are always desperate for money. And so the ability to quickly liquidate their military stores and then get an influx of a relatively stable international currency like rubles is a huge benefit to them. But you may notice that if they sold all of their stores of artillery shells, they themselves now have a problem, which is they have weakened their own conventional and nuclear deterrent vis-a-vis their enemy to the south. So what does that mean? Well, this treaty is meant to sort of help shore that up, right? So while the South may look at, the North Koreans may say, listen, the South's looking at us and they know that we've lost 5 million artillery shells. We sold them to the Russians. We don't have a lot of our strategic missile systems. So they say we need to find a way to raise our conventional deterrent capability back to its existing level. And a treaty like this does that, right? Russia comes in and says, hey, if you fight North Korea on some level, you'll be fighting us too. And that's an advantage of this mutual aid treaty, is that it can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean full Russian intervention, but it can also mean a much more a whole gradient of interventions, from selling arms to North Korea in the event of war all the way up to full military intervention. And that strategic ambiguity is hopefully going to be effective enough in North Korea's mind to keep the South at bay. But there's more to it than just this, what they call the strongest ever treaty between the two nations, right? And before we talk about that, of course, I want to talk about the fact that if you want to support the channel, you guys know sponsors really hard to come by because I cover war content. And a lot of videos get demonetized. Basically, any video that involves a person with a weapon in a war zone. That's why I depend on you guys to support the channel, right? And you can do that on combatvetnews.com. we've got a bunch of membership tiers. Any one of these tiers is going to get you access to the twice weekly videos where I find the uncensored viral combat footage from the week, and we do a really deep dive breakdown into the tactics, units, and locations involved. It's a great way to support the channel. It's a great way to help me and the team enable us to do this every day and get access to, again, that uncensored footage. And we're going to be rolling out additional benefits for the lieutenant and colonel tier as we redo the site. So once this site refreshes in, you're going to see even more benefits. So check it out, combatvetnews.com. Okay, here's what I wanted to talk about as far as some of the additional benefits of this treaty that these countries are have committed to each other, right? You know that Russia has already been supporting a lot of North Korean initiatives. For example, Russia in the UN Security Council vetoed a UN Security Council resolution to improve UN monitoring of North Korean sanctions, right? The sanctions, of course, aren't going to let them export their weapon systems. And by vetoing that monitoring, it's thought that that is what enabled Russia and North Korea to do these weapon sales. But the transfer also involves a lot of cultural, technological, and even economic ties. And as we've talked about, North Korea, one of the poorest countries in the world. Let's see if we can find the GDP per capita here. So the economy of North Korea has let's see if we can find, it is the 135th or 136th lowest GDP, right? GDP rank. So you could see GDP per capita here, U.S. about 28,000 a person, China about 18,000, and then this is trillions of GDP per capita. So North Korea, 100 right, ends up firmly on near the bottom of these lists. Let's see, should be somewhere around here, somewhere near here near the bottom. But North Korea is a really, it just considered there we go. North Korea, very little data available, but it's believed to be estimated around 15,000 a year, putting it on par with Afghanistan, right? One of the poorest countries in the whole world. And again, one of the most sanctioned. And comparable to the Bahamas in GDP. Remember, the Bahamas, though, are a tiny number of islands with a handful of people, whereas North Korea is much, much larger, right? By contrast, the South Koreans, right? Let's see if we can find it. South Korea has a GDP of something like 100 times the North's. So for them, the ability to just kind of have another country that engages them as a legitimate trading partner, as Russia is a huge potential moneymaker for them. Having a place where they can export their goods, having a country that will purchase those goods and then exchange them for a stable currency like the yuan or the ruble, something that North Korea can then use to purchase things on kind of the gray market. It's going to potentially enable North Korea to modernize a lot of their forces, get higher technology, and generally enable them, generally fill Kim Jong-un's coffers. So these kind of economic cooperation agreements can oftentimes, especially when you have this level of inequality between the countries, can make an absolutely massive difference. And you can see that North Korea and Russia actually, I think they share a small border here, right? There's Vladivostok and there's Razan, North Korea. So there's actually a potential they share a border. They could easily conduct maritime trade. This is something that is going to be very, very potentially beneficial for North Korea. And because these arms deals have already sort of created the infrastructure to get this these munitions from North Korea across Russia's surface area to Ukraine, right? This trade relationship is poised to make North Korea a lot of money. And almost every Western country has agreed this is not good, not good for the Korean Peninsula, for potential escalations. And it reflects a growing partnership among these authoritarian countries that are governed by a dictatorship, not by any kind of representative democracy. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you so much. Be sure to thank you to the Colonel tier members of CombatVetNews.com, the Lieutenant tiers. This video is going to be dropping tonight. So definitely, if you're a member, stand by. And if you're thinking about becoming a member, now is the time. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one. Like and subscribe. Cheers.